Everybody, and welcome to the 47th annual Chattanooga Hamfest. My name is Jeff Martin, and my call sign is W4EMZ, Whiskey 4 Echo Mike Zulu. GMRS is WREA 659, or I'm also known as Chat 73. And they also kind of call me the president of the Chattanooga Amateur Radio Club. Alrighty, so I wear a lot of different hats as everything. A little bit about me. Started out as a corpsman in the Navy with Fleet Marine. Came out, worked as a paramedic for a little while, became a nurse and worked in open heart surgery. Lived the miracle, did the miracle. Walked away from that, left it, cashed out, and I'm a farmer now. And I operate a dog kennel and I farm. Excuse me. Been a ham radio operator for a lot of years and really engrossed in the hobby and many, many different things. And as with any hobby, you kind of want to grow with it. And so, you know, you start out as a technician and you get this, and then you go to general and you get this, and you go to amateur extra and you get this, and then you become a GMRS and you get this, and then you're finally going, where do I grow from there? And I always wanted my own tower, all righty? So hence why the presentation today. And hopefully the knowledge that I impart to you will allow you to give a serious consideration for if you're thinking about a tower or if you think that's in your future and what that might entail. I have two towers, one and then another, and we'll kind of go over the particulars of my thought process and everything as to why. I live in the extreme north end of Hamilton County in a very rural area on a farm. And so it was very good to have a consideration for my antennas, for my UHF, VHF antennas, the verticals. As far as that's all I use my first tower for is a UHF, VHF antennas with a mounted weather station and an omnidirectional HD TV antenna. Alrighty, because I don't like paying for television, so I use an amplified HD TV antenna on the tower. As far as for my HF rig, I don't use beams or rotors and stuff like that. I didn't want to get into any of that stuff. I use an inverted V long wire that works incredibly well for me. Since I have a plethora of trees, I can have many, many wires and many, many balins, and it works good for what I use. The considerations for when a tower was, well, number one, I'm married. I have a left-handed ring. So when discussions about the tower originated, I had to include my wife. And those things included, is it going to be unsightly? Is it going to be safe? And where are you thinking about locating it? And once we had those personal conversations, then I kind of went into the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and lastly, the how much. How many buckets of money do you need in order to do a tower project? And you think you laugh at that, but we'll get to that. The biggest thing is, what did I hope to achieve by placing an antenna 35 to 50 feet in the air? My initial tower is at a height of 60 feet. Was it going to make a difference to me? Or is it just a status thing of having a tower? And it never was a status thing. I'm not that kind of person. I'm not one of these, you know, hey, I've got this or that or whatnot. It was all about functionality, where I was located and everything. The biggest thing with primary having good coverage with a VHF, UHF tri-band antenna, and the other things that were on that tower. The first thing that my wife and I talked about was a cost estimate, and breaking that down was kind of in the ballpark of, I knew the type of tower I wanted, which was a RON tower, specifically RON 25G. Had looked at the different RON catalogs and had an idea of the cost of the actual tower materials. And we were very blessed in the fact that there is a local dealer in the Chattanooga area that actually stocks tower sections and everything you need. So I didn't have to have it shipped directly to my farm They kind of split the shipping on many other things, and that makes it a little easier. I had to talk about site selection, again with my wife and what I was initially looking at. Were there any risks to adjacent property? Well, on tower number 1, there was not. I have enough acreage to where it's not going to hit anybody else's property if it falls. And the other consideration was the tower height versus was it a guide, unguided tower. I contacted my insurance carrier, which is Tennessee Farm Bureau, to talk to them about it and to run that by my carrier, since being both having our home and our farm and our business and all the different things that insurance has to have, we had to kind of run that by the underwriters. I live in the rural county of Hamilton, so there were no zoning considerations that I had to go through. And since my tower was less than 200 feet, we didn't have to involve the federal government and the FCC, FAA, things of that nature. All righty, so those were some of the things that we talked about when we were planning our tower and tower number 1. And, you know, the biggest thing is out where I'm at. My first tower is as stealthy as you can be. If you don't, you'll never see it. Absolutely never see your tower number 1 from the road. Would have zero idea it's there. I love it. My wife loves it that way. And again, it was multifunctional. And you know, there were other considerations where we put it. There was no power lines near it. It's within a fenced area, so none of my grandsons can go and scurry up the tower. To do so, they would have to go over 2 fences, and there was quite a large number of large dogs that would preclude them from doing so. You know, as far as the climate or the weather things, the RON 25G has a pretty good, its cross section, and the antennas that I chose for the tower number 1 were, they did not have a large wind cross section, so we did not have that major consideration. So our wind load was something that, since we were right at the top of the canopy there, that we did not have that much consideration. My property has a varying topography, so I call it my lower tower on my property. So it has a little bit of tree coverage around different areas. So before I advance, are there any questions so far that I can field from the group? And I know we're live streaming, so I'm sure there's folks on live that might be interested, but I'm sorry I can't take your questions that way. But anybody in the house that has a question? All right, so I'm just going to go through some photographs and everything that we took on the initial installation and stuff. If you'll notice, this is the initial installation of the tower. It was placed before the high vac unit was placed there. All righty, the high vac unit is actually attached to our dog kennel, because that's one of the things I do on my farm is kennel dogs for when you go on vacation. The hole that was there, the preparation for that tower, required a hole that was 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet deep, all righty, with a section of tower that was in the ground and a whole lot of cement, all righty, that was that. And hence the mulch there. In addition, the grounding considerations were for this particular tower this was my first tower, and so I didn't know a lot about grounding. There actually are 2 grounding straps going to 6 different 8-foot grounding rods, all righty, coming out at about a 70-degree angle from each other. And you can't see those, but those were actually buried in the yard. And I kind of did that in my own head. Nobody really told me how to do it. I think it could have been done better, but at the time it seemed like it was the right thing to do. So, and I know now I needed more, but it's better than having nothing. So, and that's where we are. So that's the base. The next thing we did after the section is we used a house bracket on it, which actually mounts it to the side of the building, and And that allows for stabilization, of course. Plus, it also allows for a coax bridge, that I like to call it, and allows the coax coming off the top of the tower to come down and bridge over to the wall. Again, it made my wife happy that way. This is my good friend Mark Rose, previous president of the Chattanooga Amateur Radio Club, and our club's resident tower climber. And he's getting to go up to this first stick here. And he's got a gin pole that he's ready to take up the tower. And that is how we chose to assemble this tower, one section at a time, and mark, with a ground crew. Never had done this before. Totally just, for this first one, we winged it. And no one was hurt in the making of these photographs. Okay, you're welcome to laugh about that. Okay, no animals or humans were hurt in the making of in the assembly of this tower. That is a miracle by the grace of God. Okay, and I stress that. I can't stress that enough. But Mark is safe. He could use a little better harness, but he does double clip in, and he takes his time and he's methodical, and he goes slow. Slow is good for him, but it makes sure that he's dotting every I and crossing every T. So getting in a hurry is not something that we did, and we didn't have to. So next is Mark going up, of course, and he's mugging for the camera there, of course. It was a beautiful day. It was cold outside, actually. It was about 35 degrees. I did not break a sweat that day. Again, a very good day. And gin pole is in place, and we are raising this section up, and the ground crew is, of course, handling the lift of the tower, and then Mark will come up and help to seat the tower on the swedged ends, bring it together, and then bolt it in place. Mark is a little higher here. We kind of jumped ahead there because you can only just hopscotch so many times, but here he is taking up the pinnacle, and you'll notice there's several things already attached to the pinnacle. There's an anemometer for a weather station right there. This funny-looking flying saucer thing is the omnidirectional TV antenna. The coax for my tri-band antenna is furled on the bottom of this pinnacle section, and the tri-band antenna is already installed. And so, sorry about that. I thought I had my phone turned off. So it is fully rigged and ready to go in place as he takes that up. Again, another photograph of Mark. I'm really not sure why he did that, but he did it. But again, we're continuing to lift that last section. We'll back up one. So once he got that last section up and seated, he would bolt it in place, of course. Then he would come down the tower methodically, unfurl the coax, lower that, and then tie in the coax and the different cables for the weather station and the omnidirectional antenna as he came down the tower. Excuse me. This is Mark having to do a little bit of adjustment of the antenna once he got to the top because of the radials that had to be installed and everything. So we had to kind of disassemble the antenna that had already been pre-assembled, so it took him a little more work on the top of the tower there. Weren't expecting that, but guess what? Things get thrown at you. And but he worked the problem, and that worked out well. He took his time and he was methodical. So that is my first tower. And excuse me, it worked very well. It definitely got me on the air, better than I had been, and it provided us with a very good weather station and over-the-air TV. My wife was happy, very happy, because we got to get rid of the dish TV and save a lot of money every month. So Now we fast forward because we are a ham. I am a ham. And guess what I wanted? I wanted my own repeater. And I thought about it. And I prayed about it. And I talked to the wife about it. And she said, okay, but you can't have it at the house. So I have property. So on the upper part of my property, which is higher in elevation, we had an open area. And so we talked about it. And then we went back to the same things of who, what, when, where, why. Why did I want it? Because I did. Was it going to achieve what I wanted? Yes. Will it make a difference in my area? Yes, it will. I had a cost estimate from the previous antenna. This next antenna was going to be taller, higher, and more advanced. I knew my site selection for antenna or tower number 2. There were really no risks to adjacent property. I knew I was going to do RON 25G again, so that was easy. This was going to be a guide antenna. Talked to the insurance company. Wasn't any zoning stuff. Tower wasn't tall enough for the FAA. So here we went. And we started. And we thought about it. And then I shared my ideas with my friends, and they suggested that at that particular time I sit and think about it some more. So I thought about it some more. And then I became involved in GMRS. And my friend Gary Owensby introduced me to my newest friend, Gary Beckstead, and then we talked about tower. And then I found out I didn't know nothing about tower. Nothing, nothing, nothing. My first tower went up by the grace of God, and nobody was hurt, and no animals were hurt in the making of that tower. And that was that. But I didn't know anything. So we had to start again. And all these different considerations that had to be done. So again, with the blessings of the wife, and since I was going to be using space in her she shed, okay, to house my repeater, so I had to rent a little space in her she shed, along with power and stuff and things of that nature. We embarked in this. We had to add power to the she shed and various things like that to get it ready for a repeater before we even started the tower. And that was an absolute government nightmare getting to be able to do that. But we progressed. And so here we are, the backside of my wife's she shed. Then there is the tower with the mound of concrete. The base there is 4 feet by 4 feet by 5 feet deep. That was hand dug by me and my good friend Mark Rose. Remember Mark climbing up the tower a minute ago? Well, picture Mark and myself with shovels. Guess what? We sweat. It was not pretty. But we got it done. And it took us a couple of days, but we had a 4 by 4 by 5 foot deep hole with adequate base and adequate tower and a whole bunch of cement, a whole bunch, all righty? And the biggest consideration was that first stick right there in the ground is perfectly plumb, absolutely perfectly plumb, and it's ready to go. So there we sat with the base of the tower in the ground, and we continued to think, oh, were we going to use a house bracket? There was one there. Mama said it was okay, so we had one. Oh, guess what? There's more grounding to be done, but I had no clue that my tower number 1 had a little bit of ground. Tower number 2, it's going to have a lot of ground, a whole lot of ground. Grounding strap off of each leg, and I'll show you, all righty, with a total of 12 8-foot grounding rods plus 3 tie-out stanchions, all interconnected, daisy-chained, if you will, back to the tower base. But it gets better. Each of those grounding rods also had a circle halo connecting each one in a nice circle. There's a lot of copper near the she shed, a whole bunch of it. Copper ain't cheap. These are the tie-out stanchions. They were fabricated. These are where my guys are These were used to sink in the ground and to provide stability for the guy wires when they were put in place. I will give credit to one of our vendors here at Hamfest who also has a fabrication shop. Jim Gifford, Chat Radio, is that man. In addition to doing ham radio and GMRS radios, he has a large metal fabrication area, and he crafted these things. They are not light. Each one weighs approximately 80 pounds, all right, with the disc at the bottom. The camera does not do them justice as far as the way the photograph were taken, all righty? So this is the repeater that I chose, and it's a Bridgecom Systems, and I had to use Sarah, our repeater coordinator for the Southeast, and guess what? It's pretty much impossible to get a VHF repeater. UHF, a little easier, but not much. So I went with somewhere in the middle, and I have a 220 megahertz repeater. Guess what? There wasn't anything in the north end of Hamilton County, south end of Meigs County, or the west side of Bradley County, or Ray County. So I am up there, pretty much an island unto myself, and it's great. But that's why I chose that. And it made perfect sense. Coming back here, you can see the base with the 3 grounding straps coming from the different areas. And the concrete is mounted up so water doesn't stand near the tower. And everything is ready. Here's one of the grounding, or one of the guy stanchions that's been set in the ground. We used a large auger, set it in place, plumbed it, and a large amount of cement was applied and allowed to percolate. When I started this tower project, I thought you could just go to Home Depot and buy some metal rope, some cable, and a few little ins and outs, and that's all you needed to guy your tower. Boy, was I wrong. That is not the way you do that. It is not at all the way you do that. So all that stuff that I bought up at the Home Depot, luckily I was within the return window. I got to return that. It's a good thing. Mama would not have been happy had I had to eat the cost of that stuff. So again, one of the tie-outs, 2 plates and a very large bolt coming together. Oh look, it's fancy galvanized rope and all sorts of turnbuckles and plates and these crazy little, I don't even know what they were called, had no, say that again?
Guide grips.
Guide grips. Didn't even know they existed, but guess what I do now? Had no clue how they were even employed, but it's amazing. Loved it. It was great. And so we got all that stuff together, and here we went. Again, base of the tower, everything getting ready. Notice it's been a minute since we put the base in because it turned green near it, all righty, and stuff. Here's all the tower sections just waiting for love and just waiting to be installed. Again, another look at one of the 3 guy tie-outs. More base. And then here is the kind of the outer view right there of the back of the she shed, part of our garden, and the upper part of our property. And here we went. Now let's back up and punt. Before tower erection, again, I became very good friends with Gary Beckstead, who provided me large amounts of guidance as to the proper way to install the tower, what not to do, example, Home Depot stuff, all righty? What to do, buy commercial grade guy wires and attachments and everything else. Provided guidance on proper grounding with the appropriate amount of copper wire and grounding rods, which in itself is a really tough evolution to get that in the ground. All of those things being in place. We could have initially placed our tower in place using a gin pole. But graciously, the folks at North Georgia GMRS have a tower crew, and they agreed to come and help. I am good friends with a tree service that I've known the gentleman who owns that service for many, many years, who I was able to contract with to bring a boom truck. And we said, gee, boom truck would make things a lot easier. Would not have to use a gin pole. Everybody shook their head and said, great, happy, a good day. So here we go. The night before, it rained, like 2 inches of rain. Doesn't look like it, but it's mushy there, quite mushy. But they brought the truck into the side, okay, and got it in place. Here's the pinnacle of my tower, tower plate, and the initial area for the top attachment points for the guys. A little closer here, you can see how they bolt on, and there's a certain way they attach through the hard points on the tower to make sure they are secure. My tower has, the upper tower rests at about 100 feet at the pinnacle, and so there are 3 guys. The tower was initially going to be a little taller, but I'll get to that. All righty, we'll get to it. You always end up with more extra sections when you're done. You shouldn't, but we did. But it's okay. So anyway, my friend Tim and our great sound guy over here who's not in the room right now, Mr. Jeff Caron, my friend Tim ran the bucket and did exactly what Jeff wanted him to do. And they are up there, and that particular bucket has a jib on the side of it, and they would attach and pick up a section of tower, and guess what? Take it up. And there we did, and there we started. It made things go very easily. Now, we had a ground crew on the ground that was pre-rigging the guide wire tie-outs on a particular section that that Mr. Beckstead had figured at what level they needed to be, and those were pre-installed. So those particulars went up as we went up, as well as guide wires already attached to those sections, and we just gently raised it up in place. So you didn't have to attach them once they got up there. Made it simple. So here we are just continuing today. Now there are some considerations at this top. There are power lines around there. There was no way around that. So my friend who operated the bucket truck had to be aware of that, and they, of course, were those safety considerations. Of course, safety considerations of where the guide wires had to be located and where their hard points were at that point. But we continued to build. It was a beautiful day. Here they are at the top, and they would swedge it in, come back down, bolt it in, and repeat the evolution. And we were able to do this tower in one day, start to finish. Here's our ground crew. That's me. And everybody else just getting tower sections ready to go up one at a time. And a lot of work with communications when we chose to do this, making sure that the folks that were in the bucket were totally calling what they wanted done and what those of us on the ground needed to do. And that was a major thing, is what is happening, and safety is paramount. Notice everybody's with their, got their headgear on, gloves on, and making sure that we had a good, safe day. So there's Jeff up in the top, continuing. If you'll notice here on this particular section of tower, it's going up with guide clips, and it does not have its guide wires on at that point. We hoisted those on this one later, one at a time, and he would attach them at that time. Here's our ground crew. That's me, and I don't know what I was saying, but here's Gary Beckstead right here, the tower monkey, all righty, who's really telling me what to do. And there's David Soyak, who calls our Tuesday night Skywarn GMRS net, and he was there for the first time and demonstrating that, that very fancy tie-down strap. Okay, what did you call that, sir?
Guy grip.
A guy grip. Okay, very good. Never met the guy grip before, but he's my friend now. Okay, and there we did. So again, guy grip, guide wire coming down, and there's a turnbuckle right in front of Gary right there that we can adjust the tension of each guy wire. As you can see, all three guys are coming into the same plate right down here. 3 turnbuckles, and again, this is guy wire number 1 going up. All righty, doing 3 at a time. While they're working up on the tower, getting things secured, we're handling those 3 and kind of communicating back and forth and doing a rough in of tension. Nothing was tensioned completely at that point. Again, another side view of the stanchion and the guys. There you go, and that's how that came together. It was quite amazing. I couldn't see how the thing gripped. I do now. It makes perfect sense. It's very professional looking, by the way. My wife Enos had said that. She said, gee, it looks like the power company did this one. I'm like, gee, thanks, sweetie. Again, still working from a different angle. And more guys. There's me actually working harder, section by section. And we'll back up just a little bit. So, my tree guy has 2 bucket trucks, the 90-foot truck and the 120-foot truck. He was supposed to bring the 120-foot truck. But guess what? His hydraulics went out on it. So he brings the 90-foot truck instead. Well, boo hiss. Wasn't very happy about that. So my tower is 20 feet shorter than it would have been. But it's okay. Okay, you live and learn. You have extra sections. We were able to do something with those sections. But we were ready to go up there. Had he brought the 120-foot truck with the 12-foot boom or jib on it, we would be 20 feet higher. But it is what it is. So, as it stands now, I have a 100-foot guide tower, 3 guide wires. The very top is a tri-band Comet GP 333 that's married to my Bridgecom Systems 220 megahertz repeater. In my relationship and growing relationship with the North Georgia GMRS group, I talked with them about it, and they were interested in possibly having some space on the tower. So to the right of that is a GMRS antenna. So I'm happy to host the Georgetown 550 repeater on my tower. So it works there. And once that was in place, once the top pinnacle was in place and everything was guided, Jeff and Tim, my boom operator, came down and they tied in hard line and various things and stuff as they came down the tower. A little closer shot right there of the pinnacle. There at the bottom of the tower, if you'll notice, my feed line is small. My budget did not allow for thick feed line. I wish it did, but the feed line for the GMRS antenna, that stuff's thick. It don't bend well. All righty, you got to have large sweeping circles. But it's going through the pass-through into the she shed, and my wife was pleased with that, as in no critters can get in her she shed through this giant hole that they put in the side of it. All righty, that was her big consideration. There's looking over the top at the guys again. And lastly, this is this really fancy program that Gary Beckstead has and he provided, and this is actually the propagation map for my repeater there. And if you go online to the North Georgia GMRS website, I think it also shows the propagation for the Georgetown 550 repeater as well. So you could see that. and that is just a projection of where I'm at. So some of the things that we provide at the farm for both repeaters, we have a repeater rack that both are mounted in the same rack. We provide a dedicated internet source for both repeaters, separate of my home and farm, that allows for the integration of the GMRS repeater, and soon the integration of my 220 repeater with an all-star node. So I will be adding an all-star node in the very near future. We tend to do a lot more work in the repeater shed in the wintertime. Since it's not air conditioned, I like for it to be 30 degrees outside so I don't sweat inside the she shed. All righty, because it can warm up even on a sunny day, just a little bit. Again, of course, there for both feed lines coming into the shed, there were polyphasers for lightning ablation as well. You know, when you guys are considering towers and everything, this is what we chose to do. I think the biggest thing you need to consider is, are you wanting a light duty, medium duty, or heavy duty tower? And, you know, there's kind of four types, really. Do you have, you know, are you wanting a, say, like we have a RON 25G that's guide? And I guess in terms of cost per foot, that's the most economical tower you can do. But you've got to have enough space for the guide wires. And there's a certain amount of space, of course, needed in order for your mathematical computations to get the angles correct. Guide anchors installed away from the base of the tower at least 60 to 80% of the tower height. The next type of tower you consider is a freestanding. They're moderately expensive. They have a they're very lean when it comes to visual impact on the environment. You don't have the guys and stuff coming out, but they're more expensive, of course. The next one I guess you could have would be a fold over or tilt tower. More expensive, of course, but practical if you want to work on your antennas without having to climb a tower. You just fold it over. But again, more expensive. And finally, you've got really the pinnacle of it, the crank up or hand crank or motor driven. Those are expensive, but they're practical, but they're pricey. And you better have your expenses in order to do something like that. Any way you do it, I think you need to sit down and honestly, before anything is purchased, make sure that you are understanding why you want to do it, what good it's going to apply to you, is it within your cost parameters, and can you do it safely, either yourself or with a group of people. It would have been virtually impossible. I could not have done the first tower and obviously the second tower by myself without a group of people helping. And as I said, the first tower we put up, no humans or animals were hurt or killed in the erection of that tower, by the grace of God, because it could have been. Learned a lot of stuff there. My first tower was non-guide. It did have the house bracket. The second tower that we placed had the ability to have a house bracket, but we ended up not using it because we guided it well. So we just, so I ended up able to sell that house bracket. When it's all said and done, you know, we came out with something that was visually pleasing, happy for the wife. It benefits both myself and our local community, both in the ham world and the GMRS world. I like to joke that the Georgetown 550 repeater is low in elevation but high in modulation. All righty, it's kind of a joke. So we are down in the valley, and yes, there are repeaters that have a higher footprint, but we're happy there, okay? And it's a pretty repeater, all righty? And it's a safe repeater, and it's well loved, and everything. And as my friends know, anything that I do, especially inside my wife's she shed, all the wires have to be secured and I's dotted and T's crossed, and it can't look all crazy and willy-nilly, all righty? It just can't do that. I have been to some repeater sites that, oh my goodness, I just open the door and just stand there and shake my head going, why? Just why? And I just never could let that happen where we're at. So that's kind of the end of it. Are there questions that I could take from the group? Someone please ask me one question, please.
Okay, so now you've got this tower standing out there, and there's 4 of us in this room who were there when all this was being done. Are there things that happen after towers get built that cause the tower owner to awake in the middle of the day, worried, shaken?
There are things that happen to the tower owner after said happen. One of which happened just as soon as the tower was completed. You recall my friend Tim, he drove the bucket truck. The night before, we got 2 inches of rain. I told him which way to enter the area, and he followed that. It caused some ruts in the ground, but we were fine with that, okay? We set the bucket truck and put out the outriggers and did what we needed to do. All was good. I also told him when we were done for the day which way to exit on non-disturbed ground and leave the area. Somehow that did not get communicated correctly. And they proceeded, instead of pulling forward and pulling out, they proceeded to back up. And the bucket truck got buried to its axles. And there was no helping it. There was nothing we could do. They spun their wheels. It took till the next day to get the bucket truck off of my farm. It took numerous buckets of topsoil from my tractor to fill in the ruts and the giant holes that had been dug trying to get the bucket truck out of my farm. My wife was not happy, okay? She was only happy when the holes were filled and the grass seed was resown. Most recently was having some work done up near the tower with one of the, inside the garden area where my wife plants everything and we grow our vegetables. One of the tie-out stanchions is in there, okay, in the middle of the garden. That took a lot of approval from the wife, okay, but it works. The individuals were spreading some mulched material and some composted chicken litter. Someone got a little too close to the tie-out stanchion with a skid steer. Let me repeat that. Someone got a little too close to the tie-out stanchion with a skid steer. They bumped it. It is now 4 degrees off of vertical. I knew this. I was not happy. Luckily, it did not pull it away from the tower. It sort of pushed slack in the guys. Everything was okay. I made a couple of non-frantic phone calls, but phone calls that, well, I don't know if it was a frantic phone call, but it was an urgent phone call as to what had happened. Number 1, it has been struck. Number 2, it is off vertical. Number 3, it did not stress the tower when it happened. Number 4, this is where we are. And we were able just to retension the guide wires and go on. We did not make any attempt to re-vertical the tie-out stanchion. I was not going to have them push on it with the skid steer again. Does that make sense? Okay, just take the skid steer and go away. Leave. Shoo.
Which direction did you point him to take?
Leave the garden area through that gate, load it back on your flatbed, and shoo. Go away. Bye. Now, I had to be nice. He's a very nice gentleman. He was doing it for free, and I do to go to church with him. So I had to be pleasant. I was pleasant. Accidents happen, but one does need to pay attention to what's happening, especially around anything, because that could have turned into a very big mess very, very quickly, without question. So, other considerations, of course, you have to go back and retention guys from time to time and stuff like that, and be, you know, just be aware of your surroundings and stuff. Yes, sir.
Why did you choose the fabricated anchors for your guys versus the screw-in guys?
Honestly, as far as installation goes, screw-in guys and having to have the device to screw them in, hard to acquire,
Hard to do.
hard to do, hard to acquire. In my area, I would have had to have begged someone at my local electrical co-op, and the cost was prohibitive. So that's why I chose what I did.
I screw mine in manually.
I'm sorry.
They're hard.
They're hard to do it manually. And the length we would have done that would have just been out of the way. So that's why we didn't do that. So, any other questions? Yes?
What did you use for connecting your ground wires to your stakes, the rods?
To the rods?
Yeah.
Just a standard acorn connector. Okay, are you familiar with acorn connector
Yeah.
for a grounding wire? That's what I use, standard acorn connector with the grounding wire coming through it and continuing on. Okay, so. Other questions?
What's the frequency for 220?
The exact frequency and everything, I'll be happy to give that to you personally when we finish, okay? I'll be happy to give you the particulars of the repeater frequencies once we're off the live stream, okay? All right. Any questions? Also, I don't typically share the exact location of mine repeater or the GMRS repeater. I only speak in generalities, all righty? Because I would prefer people not to come and visit my farm unannounced. We're friendly and all and stuff, but I have very big dogs, and if they don't know you, well, they don't know you. So, you know, and we'll go from there. So, any other questions?
Well, I think one thing that you've been saying, but not saying so bluntly, the bigger the tower is, the greater the risk you can get killed, or somebody else can get killed. So you plan these things.
Yes, you do.
You don't just pop them up and say, oh, I know how to do it, which was the path you were originally on.
That's exactly right. There was, you know, there was a lot of things happen, and a lot of people could have gotten dead that day. So, I mean, we were very methodical in how we did it, and, you know, and that's a good way to be. You do it the same way all the time, unless somebody throws you a curve, and then you kind of have to play with it there. And, you know, when Jeff and Tim were up in the bucket, they had to improvise a little bit during the day. They did, but they had to work with it. I mean,
I think you may have mentioned this and I was outside on the telephone, but I think it's important to mention too that during the process of that tower, as good as our plan was, we still had to call an audible and, hey, this is not safe or this is not going to work. We're not going to continue as planned. Let's stop and replan where we're at. And we were, what, an hour into work when that happened?
right. And we had to stop and rethink everything at that point. And, you know, we had to rethink the fact of he didn't bring the biggest bucket truck, so that cut us 20 feet there, you know, pretty much. We would have liked to have gone it, and we had the materials, and we could have done it. Had we had the other truck, I think we would have been, you know, 20 feet higher. But you just have to adapt. Did it really affect the propagation? It was minimal for both. So, you know, I walked away happy that day and everything. Other questions? Anything else? Well, it's been a pleasure talking to everybody today. I'll be happy to talk to folks individually if you like, or in the group once we come off the live stream. If you ever have any questions, feel free to contact me through the Chattanooga Amateur Radio Club, and I'll be happy to discuss with you. If you'd like to look at materials, you can always go online to the Ron Tower website and download the Ron Tower catalog, and that can give you a lot of useful information as to what you need. And those folks are quite helpful. If you contact them on the phone, they'll answer your technical questions and stuff. And then there's folks, of course, within the North Georgia GMRS Network that would happy to talk to you about, you know, tower planning and stuff and considerations in that regard. So again, thank you for your time and attention. We sure appreciate it. Y'all have a safe weekend and enjoy Hamfest Chattanooga. Bye-bye.